All right, here we go. Let's go. We're going to be live in 6 minutes. Good afternoon, everyone. A beautiful day here in Dedham. We are once again at the Karen retrial. Interesting morning. Talk about that. Talk about some of the other news. Yes, we are live on YouTube. Let me check our X connection. I'm going to walk you through the latest on that. I think it's interesting that yes, there we go. Yep. Check our X connection. Sounds very solid. Sounds very solid. All right. We're going to be starting in just a couple moments. Okay, and we're going to have attorney Stephanie Murphy is going to join us as well. So I like folks being right here. Puts us in the shade. So nothing overheats, which is nice. And remember, on Facebook, you can share that you are watching. Good, yes. We are live outside of Dedham. And it is the lunch break right now. So we're going to be starting in just a couple moments. We're going to speak with attorney Stephanie Murphy. Okay. Let me double check that. I think we're good to go. In just 4 minutes. Folks, what a beautiful... Beautiful day. We'll bring you up to speed on that and other stories as well. With what's making news. Yep. Thank you, Bendy. But then we are going to speak with attorney Stephanie Murphy. She's going to be joining us coming up. That right there. Okay. Just double check. JR says we're good to go. And I'm doing something very interesting after 2 o'clock. Talk about it later. The subscribers know, but we're going to hold off announcing anything just yet. Yeah, the naked fat test coach, that has now been delayed. Apparently something with the judge. We'll ask Stephanie Murphy about that. And that's going to be coming up. So I'm going to start off with the latest. How about Senator Sheldon Whitehouse on with Gavin Newsom?
Unless you're selling it to a billionaire who can pay you.
I'll post that. I will be posting that, everybody. 40-minute lunch break. Okay. Very hectic here for a lot of the people that work here around the courts. But so far, here we are. All right, there's the YouTube connection is solid. So, folks, remember you can watch and listen on YouTube and also Facebook and then also X. And then obviously on the radio, which is AM 1380 and 99.9 FM. But I'm going to start off talking about, and we are live at 106. Good afternoon, everyone. This is, yes, it's the real news. We're on location right now, and we are once again outside of the courthouse. It is day 2 of the retrial of Karen Reed. So I'm going to touch on that. I mean, we're right here. We'll give you some of the updates on it, cover the latest, but then we also have our legal expert attorney, Stephanie Murphy. She's going to be joining us. We're going to ask her about that story and then several other stories. There are some other interesting stories that are in the mix right now. But right now, on this Wednesday, April 23rd, it is so far, I'd say it's the nicest day of the new year. Nicest day of the new year, 25. Excuse me. And folks, what a good day to be outside if you can be. First, stop by PR Landscape Materials and Garden Center. They have everything you need. They're officially open for the season. Locally owned. I'll tell you, Steve and Debbie and Junior, they do such a great job. They have a beautiful selection of pansy flats, pansy bags, hangers and bowls, assorted colors, Easter tulips, forsythias, daffodils, hydrangeas, and the colors available are blue, white, and pink. Stop in and see them, folks. Rhode Island's #1 garden center is open for the season. It's PR Landscape Materials and Garden Center, 3688 Quaker Lane in North Kingstown. Stop in and see them today. Now, momentarily, we are going to speak with our legal expert. You're going to see her appear on the screen, and that is attorney Stephanie Murphy. And folks, remember, if you have a legal situation, Marin, Barrett, and Murphy, criminal defense lawyers, 50 years combined Rhode Island criminal defense experience. Your fight becomes their fight. Give them a call at 401-228-8271. You can look for them on both Facebook and Instagram. It's Marin, Barrett, and Murphy. And what I like is, now remember, if you have a legal situation and you want to get some, an initial free consultation, you may find that you definitely need an attorney. You might also find that you don't need an attorney. But why not call, find out, just say you're a friend of the show, Marin, Barrett, and Murphy, 401-228-8271. So let's bring her on. Again, she is our legal expert, and we're probably going to start, I would imagine, with the trial. And there she is. Good afternoon, Stephanie Murphy.
Hi, John. How are you?
I'm very good. Stephanie, why don't we start off? The trial is new, but a couple different elements about the trial. There were 2 people that were arrested yesterday for going through the buffer zone. Now, they've set up buffer zones around the courthouse. Some people are saying, how is this possible? In America, you have rights. You can film wherever you like. If you could just touch on about why these individuals were arrested.
Well, I think the buffer zones were established first of all so that the trial can go through peacefully without people protesting, without the jurors hearing chants, and everything that kind of went on the first trial. So I think they're trying to do it to really give a fair trial to Karen Reed. So I think that's the most important thing of why they're doing it. In terms of free speech and everything like that, the public does have a right, and it's, courthouses are public. This trial is public, but the courts are doing a good job of streaming the trial and everything like that. So there are a lot of different ways that anyone can really be involved and to, witness a trial and to hear everything. But I think the problem really comes down to having a fair and impartial trial and having the jury not be affected. So in the court's mind, those rights of Karen Reed outweigh the interest of the public in getting close to the courthouse.
Stephanie, some supporters are a little confused initially because in the first trial, there was tremendous emphasis on third-party culprit, that something had happened inside the house. This time around in the retrial, the defense seemed to have backed off on that, and they're focusing more on what they believe was a botched police investigation. If you could touch on that, the defense is not tied to whatever they said for the third-party culprit in the first trial. They're not confined to just use that here in the retrial.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you do have a retrial, like in this case, The defense can put on whatever sort of cases they want. There's some times where you have to give notice of certain defenses, such as alibi, the third party culprit, that you have to give kind of notice to. But the defense has an opportunity to go with the flow, much more so than the prosecution does. They can kind of pivot or change. Sometimes what I worry about as a defense attorney is once you make an opening statement and you kind of lay out your case to the jury, you're kind of stuck with that. So the jury doesn't really want to hear an opening and then not have you show what you told them you would show. So they are kind of roped into what they said in the opening statements, which I viewed both of them and listened to both of them, but they can kind of pivot and change based on what the testimony, what the judge is allowing in, what the testimonies say, if the witnesses change their story. So defense can definitely pivot a lot more than the prosecution can. And that's probably just one of their strategies that, that they're doing. And the defense has an opportunity to present a case or not present a case. And they can also present those defenses or not go through those defenses at the time of their case if they put one on.
How important is it in opening argument for both sides to then be able to kind of deliver, so to speak, on the goods of which they, promised the jury, saying in the trial, you're going to see A, B, and C? How important has your experience been that then that is delivered with the jury?
I think that's very important. And it's sometimes why defense attorneys will waive an opening statement and not present one right away. There's some cases where I don't really know what the witnesses are going to say or if a witness is going to show up. So the last thing I want to do is go before the jury in opening statements and make a promise that they're going to hear something. And then maybe that witness doesn't show up, or maybe that witness changes their story. A lot of things you don't know what's going to happen during the course of the trial. So there's good reasons for sometimes a defense attorney to waive the opening, although I do think it's always better to give an opening if you can, even if it's brief. But you should never promise something. Either side should never promise something that you're not going to hear, because you don't want to lose a trial based on the fact that you extrapolate some information from a witness that you promised in the beginning.
Folks, again, it's attorney Stephanie Murphy. Stephanie, are there any other thoughts or just random observations on the trial? What I find interesting is the prosecution is certainly dropping in these different video clips because the defendant, Karen Reed, has done so many interviews, and they're parsing them out and dropping them in after each witness. I've never seen anything like that before.
I know it's a unique opportunity where typically you have a defendant who has really never given a statement, maybe to the police originally. But in this case, there are so many statements that Karen has given throughout the entire course of the first trial, of any witness, any interviews that she did, the television series. She speaks to the reporters all the time. And so those can absolutely come in and be used. You don't see it done that often, but they are doing snippets of different, things that she said. I think some of them are being taken out of context. That would be the defense attorney's role to kind of get the right context and kind of set the story straight. But not only the defense attorneys have, the work cut out for them with all the different statements that she's given. I typically always advise my clients not to give statements for this reason. There are so many in this case.
And just Stephanie, finally on that note, I mean, there is a reason why they say you have the right to remain silent. What you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. And we're actually, people hear that, but we're actually seeing it play out, that there's the defendant who's sitting there silently, and yet her clips are, building like a montage now in the courtroom.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure the closing arguments from the prosecution will just be playing all the clips that she said, having a little slideshow of all the clips. It's very unique because you normally don't have that in any cases. And I would be worried as a defense attorney if my client had given that many statements. But at least they were given all those statements ahead of time. They know what they are. And, they're a very sound legal team that can go through everything and attack it the right way. But I would be very worried about it.
Now, meanwhile, another high-profile case, and people are asking me about this, that the Aaron Thomas trial is delayed. It's being delayed a second day. People in North Kingstown, they should not be alarmed. Some people start to immediately go to, what's happening here? How unusual is it that apparently there's an emergency with the judge that is delaying the trial?
Well, unfortunately, in cases like this, you have a set number of jurors. You do have 2 alternates, but you have 1 judge, and you typically have 1 prosecutor, 1 defense attorney. Once the trial gets going, those people need to be there. So I know during COVID, this happened more so than not, where a trial would get delayed because somebody got sick. So it's not uncommon. It's definitely, once a judge starts hearing a case, that that judge needs to continue. You can't just swap somebody out mid-trial.
There's heavy rumors going on right now that it's actually generating media attention, and that is that there's a serial killer, not just in the Rhode Island area, but in the New England area. So a lot of people are spreading this and they're trying to link it. I'd like to hear your thoughts on how that could play in potentially regarding some of the human remains and bodies that it is true they have been found, but we have not heard from law enforcement that there's any type of connection with a serial killer.
I'm really hopeful that, as in any investigation with law enforcement, that law enforcement will just take every individual remains and do their job and investigate, and not get pressure from social media or by other people who really aren't involved to kind of group them together. A lot of times when we see botched investigations, is because they come to an assumption right away and they don't look at other avenues. I mean, I think that even pertains to the Karen Reed trial in terms of what's going on, what the defense is saying. So you don't want the investigator or the law enforcement to latch on to one idea and not pursue everything. All these victims deserve, a thorough investigation that's not compromised by social media or compromised by other people's opinions. There's DNA evidence, there's statements. There's a lot that the police can do, and I'm sure the police will do their job, investigate every case individually.
Only because if someone was being accused of one of these crimes, I think for reasonable doubt, if you start to push forward that, hey, there's a serial killer out there, you tell me, could that raise reasonable doubt potentially with a jury?
I mean, absolutely. If they're going, if the serial killer theory is out there, almost the state would almost be burdened with trying to prove it's part of a serial killer and not just an individual, murder. They would have to prove not only was this person murdered by this person, but then was this theory out there that this person was part of a larger conspiracy. So yes, I definitely think it can definitely play into proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
Now, this next story, I'm hearing from a number of people in the area, and they wanted me to ask you about this story because they feel under the situation that the person should kind of almost be off limits. But Cumberland man arrested after fire reveals a marijuana operation. So there's a fire at the house. When they get there, apparently they discover that regardless whatever the cause was, but they had a marijuana operation going in the house. What is the legal culpability? Because some people that contacted me said, what happened to, it's private and they did that just to get in. Or I thought if you, report that maybe someone has drugs of some kind, that you don't get prosecuted that way. What about this particular case, Stephanie?
So yeah, in Rhode Island, there's certain numbers for the number of plants, number of seedlings, everything like that. So even though there's some laws or even no laws in terms of possession of marijuana to a certain amount, there's definitely rules and regulation about the number of plants you can have. It is very regulated and everything like that. So with the fire and that circumstance, the police and fire department are called. So they're inside the house and they witness something in clear view and plain view. So I think that's kind of the avenue the law enforcement's going on in order to charge him with all the plants and stuff like that. It's not a situation where they're coming in without a warrant or, no emergency situation. So I think it's a little bit different than, just a report of somebody growing marijuana or something like that.
And for those saying, this will hesitate for people to call first responders, I don't know if that's really going to be detrimental to people saying, hey, I think, my neighbor has a fire or I have a fire. I don't think that it would apply that way. I'll give you a final word.
I think safety is a primary concern and stuff like that. And that always should be. If somebody gets charged and stuff like that, give us a call and we can walk you through it and try to suppress the evidence they have against you. There's a lot of legal doors that we can jump through in terms of, helping someone out in that situation where there's a fire, that there's a report, was it in plain view? Did they extend the search too much? There's a lot of suppression issues in this case that could come forward.
Folks, now it's time for Murphy's Law or Stephanie's Selection. This is a case or story in the news that Stephanie has found. And what do you have for us this week, Stephanie?
So what I've been following kind of from the get-go is that Wisconsin defendant who actually attacked her first attorney a couple of years ago. And then just the other week during a probable cause hearing, she attacked her second attorney in court. It was on video, watched the video. And the judge made the attorney continue with the hearing. They took about a 45-minute recess, and the judge made the attorney continue on the hearing and then said he could withdraw afterwards. And the defendant was actually on video, not in the courtroom. So I think it's an interesting story in terms of, an attorney's obligation to zealously represent someone after you've just been attacked. I understand, it was scheduled for a hearing that the judge ordered the attorney to continue, but I just think it raises a lot of points in regards to job responsibility, how you zealously advocate for your attorney, and kind of what's going to happen in the future with her. She has a right to be in the courtroom. She has a right to be present. Is she only going to be on video? There's a bunch of, defendants in Rhode Island who have a history of violence, but the sheriff's department do a great job of making sure everyone's in the courtroom present for their hearings. I think it's an important right that everyone has to be present and be a part of their hearing. So I find that case pretty interesting, and I'm interested to see what happens in the future with different court appearances with her.
Folks, again, she is attorney Stephanie Murphy. Stephanie, excellent job as always, and we'll talk to you again.
Great. Thanks, John. Bye.
All right, folks, there it is. Attorney Stephanie Murphy right here joining us during the real news. And okay, and there we go. And then we are back. Now, I want to stay on schedule. I am going to update you on this Karen Reed case because and I'll explain in just a moment. But again, just remember, Stephanie, Marin, Barrett, and Murphy, call them. Free consultation, 401-228-8271, 401-228-8271. From Marin, Barrett, Murphy. You can also look for them on Facebook and Instagram. And also, this portion of our program brought to you by Propane Plus. Remember, for all your propane needs, call them today, 401-885-4209, or in Massachusetts, 508-252-3359. Propane Plus, they also have a very user-friendly website. It's online at propaneplus.com. You just type in your zip code, residential and commercial. You can depend on Propane Plus. Again, look for them online, propaneplus.com, or call them today in Rhode Island, 401-885-4209. Now, I want to touch on the Karen Reed trial, and especially I want to start off with, we'll give you the latest. But I also want to touch on some things that happened yesterday. Now, as far as the defense attorney, Alan Jackson, make no mistake about it, the guy is very skilled. He's one of the top attorneys in the country, defense attorneys. What you're seeing right now is, so far, there's a lot of attorneys on the other side, but it's the Alan Jackson show so far. But in the opening argument, I'm not saying that, of course, listen, the guy's charismatic, and he's got real skills as a public speaker. But when it came down to Special Prosecutor Hank Brennan, who didn't need any notes and had his opening and was just rolling through it and telling a story, I think Alan Jackson could make anything interesting. But I just think in comparison to that, I think Hank Brennan was strong. And some of the things that Hank Brennan, the special prosecutor, touched on. I also want to point out, Alan Jackson made some pretty strong claims. And you just heard from attorney Stephanie Murphy, if they can't get him in that house, and by the way, a big story that's not being covered locally is they've abandoned the whole conspiracy that he was beaten in the house. And I believe that's because the prosecution, the Commonwealth, have the technology on his phone. He has Waze, and also just to map exactly where he was. And he was always by his phone, and the temperature of the phone. So I believe they have, and it should be reported more because so much of it was made in the first trial, but in this retrial, they are not going after all the different people as it was described, where every witness becomes a suspect. And so far, we haven't had any of the people in the house, but I want to touch on the first two witnesses that we've had. Now, as I mentioned to attorney Stephanie Murphy, so far, I think the use of the clips of Karen Reed, I think it's really effective. You got to understand, she is sitting there silently. And the only time the jury is hearing her is these clips of interviews that she's done. Now, I recognize some of her supporters, and you even heard Stephanie say that there's not the proper context of it. However, hey, all is fair game, right, in war. And so far, especially, and I want to talk specifically which one I'm referring to is, as many of you know on Road Patrol, listen, we deal and interact with first responders literally every single night. So as I've talked about, no, I don't think all police are corrupt. And that first witness yesterday, Timothy Nuttall, and he's a paramedic. And, this is like so many of people that are first responders. They're at the station and then suddenly they're called into action. I think he had a good story on, he was motivated because what his father had done at a young age, that he wanted to be a first responder. He wanted to be literally in the business of saving lives. And I can't believe the guy was being attacked online. So this is just in my thought. I thought Alan Jackson went way too hard on this guy. And in defense of first responders, folks, he's there to try to save the life of Officer John O'Keefe. Now, they're arguing. I can't believe people were saying that the guy was lying. No, he wasn't lying. If you're a first responder, if you're a police officer or you're a firefighter, and you're on the scene and you're saying, I know the defendant was saying, I hit him. I mean, does it matter whether it was 2 times or 3 times? I mean, they play the video of Karen Reed saying, I said I hit him. I just didn't say it as many times as they said. Does it really matter? And they are putting it to the mat. And I get it, Jackson, he's skilled. He can have you chasing your tail. He could have someone, confessing to the Kennedy assassination. But first response, that Nuttall, and I don't know the guy at all. He didn't know anybody. He was doing his job and was called into this. He didn't want to be in court yesterday. He signed up to be a first responder. This business of people saying that he was shredded. The guy has dedicated his life to a profession where his role is to save lives. It's like the first responders that work in an emergency room. And to go after the guy in this manner and call him a liar. If you're in that situation, a paramedic, and he's trying to get the compressions going, and he can hear Karen Reed, and I don't know, did she say I hit him 2 times? Did she say it 3 times? Does it blanking matter? And then they are pummeling him with that? That's where I break off. Folks, you see when we're out, and you'll see many situations. First responders are there. There's someone's been in a car accident. There's someone that maybe there's self-harm. Many times we see the first responders because they're working with the police. Is that who you're really going to go after? These people that arrive on the scene with one mission, and it's to try to save the life of the individual. And you're going to bang the guy over the head with a hammer because one time she said, I hit him 2 times, and the other time was 3 times. This is where I just think the jury looks at this like, what are we talking about? And I use the equivalency of, there were people that were saying with the OJ trial, and Karen Reed said she would have been cheering, she was cheering for OJ to get away with it. There were people that were saying, well, there wasn't a lot of Ron Goldman's blood in the Bronco. And myself and others would say, why was there any Ron Goldman blood in the Bronco? The LA police didn't plant anything like that. Ron Goldman didn't know O.J. Simpson. So this argument of, well, there wasn't a lot of his blood in the Bronco. The answer should have been, there shouldn't have been any of his blood in the Bronco. The reason his blood was in the Bronco was because O.J. had just killed him. That's why his blood was in the Bronco. That's the only reasonable explanation. So this business of going after Nuttall, look at that, he's a liar. First she said it 3 times, then 2 times. You have video, I think it's all negated. You have video of Karen Reed then saying, I know I said I hit him. I just don't think I said it as many times as they're claiming. Okay, I don't think that's much of a defense. Folks, this portion of the program, especially on a nice sunny day like this, certainly reminds us that summer is on the way. Kids Club on the Pike, they have their summer camp coming. Reserve the space for your child or grandchild today. Kids Club on the Pike, birthday party venue for an after-school program, preschool program, and summer camp. Kids Club on the Pike. Call and reserve your spot today, 401-443-5336. Maybe it's for a week. Maybe it's for 2 weeks. Maybe it's for a month. Maybe it's for the whole summer. They're located right off of 295, Kids Club on the Pike, 401-443-5336. Well, folks, good afternoon on, as I said, what is so far just a beautiful, this has turned into a beautiful day. It's going to be really nice today. It's going to be really nice tomorrow. I also just want to remind you, I did receive an email from Melissa. Melissa's thinking of getting a new roof, and she emailed me and said, who is that company that you recommend? It's Roof Co. Rhode Island, 401-868-7149. 401-868-7149, Roof Co. Rhode Island. Maybe they'd be happy to inspect your roof for wind damage and give you a free estimate. Wind damage, leaky roof, maybe you have an old roof, curled shingles, granules in the gutter, damaged chimney flashing. Call Roof Co. Rhode Island today. They're another one. I share their Facebook page. 401-868-7149. Now, this morning on Good Morning America, the witness that was just on the stand, Terry Roberts, and I want to just check because I don't want to miss any of, in a day like today, there's a lot of news, and I want to just, oh, good, okay. There we go. All right. Okay. I want to just double check something. Okay. So, this is very good news, as a matter of fact. So, I will be in the courtroom starting on Monday. So, they rotated. So, for planning purposes. Now, I'm a little bit gypped because Monday is also going to be the ARCA people. But, hey, who's complaining? So, let's see. Christina, Inside Edition, Channel 5, David, Boston Herald, Boston.com. Okay, now let's get back to some of the news of the day. And I want to just stay with, so on Good Morning America this morning, they had Terry Roberts, and the Matt Gutman was the person that did the piece on this. And I just want to, the defense has abandoned the conspiracy. This was the
Terry Roberts is part of a group of witnesses whose testimony points to Karen knowing that she hit John O'Keefe with her car. And one key difference that we picked up on this time, the defense still says that there was a botched investigation and a cover-up. But this time around, they're no longer hinting that there was some sort of big police conspiracy afoot. It's unclear how long he'd be involved.
Now that is, I know some people that have not been following it. It may not resonate as much right now at 133, but that's really significant. And the reason that's significant, and I don't have a reason why, I don't know why it has not been highlighted more, specifically with the Boston media. But for those that followed the trial, as we pivot just a little bit, folks, because of the, as you can hear, I mean, this place is like, it's like they're running a firefighting camp. The amount of fire first responder vehicles that go by. And they're loud, but the good news is they wave them right through. There you go, dead on fire. So, well, what I want to point out that I think is so significant is that was the story. The story was this massive police corruption that framed Karen Reed, and I don't think it has even fully resonated with a lot of her supporters. I can tell you, I don't have an answer for it, why it's not bigger in Boston media, that the defense has basically given up on that narrative. So, but just talking about the trial, what I think defense attorney, and this is really important, Alan Jackson, he is showing he's very aggressive with the witnesses. Hey, last trial, last spring, Terry Roberts, who testified yesterday and then today, and she did a segment with Good Morning America. Last time around, last spring, she was not even cross-examined. And this time around, she was cross-examined. And I don't, oh, hold on. Sorry, folks. I got to keep this on simply because of the microphone. No, I can change the microphone. Simply because they they're trying to paint this narrative that I believe that somehow that she was being manipulated with some of her testimony. But I want to come back to some of the first responders that are being dragged in on this, the way they're being treated. I want to remind people, when you have first responders and they're in literally life and death situations and they are relying on our training, I don't think it goes well and plays well. If I was on a jury and I was watching a first responder being taken apart and hammered on the stand because the defense keeps saying, well, did the person say something very incriminating 2 times or 3 times? As I stated, I don't think it matters as much. Now, staying with the current retrial just for a moment, there's something very significant. And unless you really follow the trial, I don't think you'd be aware of it. But it is basically these expert witnesses that the defense was banking a lot on. And they're from a company called ARCA. And what Special Prosecutor Hank Brennan has uncovered is there was kind of an unholy alliance. They were paid. They didn't initially say they were paid. The defense didn't announce they were paid. I know if you're a casual observer, it may not mean much, but as someone that has really followed this case, so many of the supporters keep saying that there's no way Karen Reed was struck. There's no way that John O'Keefe, Karen Reed is going to be, as I say, factually innocent, because the ARCA people were testifying that they don't believe John O'Keefe's injuries were consistent with a car strike. Well, there's a big dispute about that. And now it would seem they're going to be in court on Monday. And yesterday, with opening argument, Alan Jackson wanted to invoke that. And now he can't invoke it because I don't know what they're going to say. I don't know what these witnesses are going to say on the stand. But the whole thing is certainly bizarre that the defense seemingly is willing to even take a penalty on not releasing the communication between them and these experts. So on Monday, it was supposed to be Friday. On Monday, they're going to be brought in and have to answer some questions on why the communication between them and the defense is missing. So, but that's a key element of the case. I understand if the people that are supporters of Karen Reed, they are cheering on as Attorney Alan Jackson, the defense attorney. He did the open, he did the cross on Nuttall, and then he just did the cross on Kerry Roberts. They're cheering him on that he is pounding away. I would just argue, now again, in following a lot of different trials and cases, folks, you can't go to the mat all the time, right? Like you may know, if you've ever dealt with whether an effective boss or an effective teacher, everything can't be a 5-alarm fire. Everything can't be, or it loses effectiveness. You see coaches that lose a locker room. If the coach treats every game as life or death and is, got his knee on the neck of whoever the players are, it wears thin after a while. You can't continually do that. So I would just argue, I think Attorney Alan Jackson, I'm not saying the guy's not talented, but you can't, he didn't even talk about Karen Reed in his open. There was nothing about her. There was nothing that she loved the niece and nephew. There's nothing about how she's been devastated since John O'Keefe is gone. There's nothing about her. It's all attack, attack, attack. I'll say this about Jackson. I think he's just, that's who he is. He plays the hits. He goes in for the attack. And over the course of a long trial, maybe if somebody's really tough and confrontational and beating someone up in the beginning, you get their attention. But I believe after a while, I just think that act gets old, and I don't think it plays as well. So, but I wonder, are they boxed in? Are they boxed in because they were literally counting on these ARCA experts? I don't know. Folks, I want to remind you about Arch Design Builders. Arch Design Builders, call them today, 401 207 4124. Arch Design Builders. If you're thinking of a new kitchen, new bathroom, new basement, new deck, a special project, Arch Design Builders, you're going to want to deal with the experts. You're going to want to deal with the real dream team. You're going to notice the Arch difference. Family business, integrity, quality. Ed and Roxanne, I am giving you the roadmap. This is who you want to deal with. Call them 401 218 9707. 401 218 9707 for Arch Design Builders. What a difference they could make with your home or business. Well, folks, good afternoon. And I want to just inject some reality here. We are in Dedham. We are outside. This is day 2 of the Karen Reed retrial. And granted, the prosecution, they're up. I think it's interesting how they have moved the witness list around. Someone to watch for. And I don't know if the rest of the media is going to pick up on this, but someone to watch who did not testify in the first trial is John O'Keefe's mother, Peg O'Keefe. Peg O'Keefe, she's there all the time. I think the world of her. She lost her daughter to cancer. She then lost her son-in-law, and then she had her son killed. Peg O'Keefe, the matriarch of the family, who's so strong, who leads with grace, who that morning, Karen Reed, there's video of Karen Reed doing an impression of Peg O'Keefe, and a perfect time as I think ahead to drop that in will be after Peg O'Keefe testifies, where Karen Reed, this video of her saying, "Wait, is that the tail?" And she does it's an insulting, degrading impression. Can you imagine you would do an impression of the mother of your boyfriend who lost his life? It is, I don't know what to think of that. And it's one thing you do with your friends for whatever reason, but to do it on camera, to know that you're mic'd up and start doing an impression of John O'Keefe's mother, I think the ideal time to drop that in is going to be right after she testifies. So I think that could be a good moment. But I want to touch on the phone because, folks, as technology goes along, these are with us everywhere. And you just can't deny that. People are, our phone has become inseparable. How many people, if you're watching right now or listening, remember, we're on AM 1380, 99.9 FM. We're also live right now on YouTube, we're live on X, and we're live on Facebook. How many people track family members, specifically children, based on their iPhone? And you even have on the Find My iPhone. And parents then know that they're supposed to be at, just for example, the movies, or they're supposed to be at a friend's house, and there are people. Our phones track our movements, whether or not people like it, whether or not people say that's Big Brother, what have you. But it's just a fact. And what I believe, if you want to deal in reality, with the technology they have, and that they've been able to pinpoint more specifically where he was when he got out of the car, the fact that he never entered the house, the fact that he was always right there, the fact that there was grass underneath where he was found, you can be the biggest supporter of Karen Reed and the feds. All I'm suggesting is that's problematic. Now, if people want to just say, well, everyone's lying, okay. I guess that's a defense, but I don't think that's going to be a successful defense. But you can't argue with that there's data. You can't argue. I don't know how many people you get your phone and you look at, it shows you made a 2-minute phone call to someone. If you then contact them and start arguing that it was really, it wasn't a full 2 minutes, it was 1:49. The data is the data. and we tend to accept it. So the fact that Karen tells a story, and she has with interviews, again, I still think that's her greatest undoing, is how many interviews that she has done. When I go back to former Providence Mayor Buddy Cianci, he would not really discuss the case. There were no recordings of him played in that trial where he was discussing the case. When I covered the Freddie Bishop trial, there were no recordings of them discussing the case. When I covered the Meyer Brophy Bayerman case, there were witnesses that testified things that the accused said, but they didn't actually have a video of it. A problem for the Reed defense is how many interviews that she's done. And when she's on video saying, I saw him pop his head in, and then they're going to have data that shows he got out of the car and then never left that area on the lawn by the flagpole, I would just suggest that's problematic. And I know some people get angry at that, but the data is the data. And for those that, if you want to deal with truth, I think the truth of what happened will be presented, but I have found there's many people they don't actually want the truth. Folks, this portion of the program, now speaking of first responders, I want to remind you about Serve Pro of Providence. They're fast, they're thorough, they are professional. Call them. Remember, when disaster strikes, call Serve Pro of Providence, 401-941-5500. 401-941-5500. So what do I mean? If there's a fire, if you have a pipe burst and suddenly you have water damage, mold, this is what they do. And they're available 24/7. Serve Pro of Providence, 401-941-5500. 401-941-5500. Water damage, fire, mold, Serve Pro of Providence, 401-941-5500. Well, folks, again, good afternoon. 1:48 on this Wednesday. And again, we are in Dedham with the Karen Reed trial. Now, there's also something interesting that's happening at another courtroom that we will follow, but that is the Maripisi trial, and that is the terrible murder. It was 2019. Lauren Easy lived in an apartment in Cranston. Her ex-boyfriend was accused of breaking in. See what I mean about the sirens? Her ex-boyfriend was accused of breaking in and viciously killing her in the apartment. From what I understand, I'm led to believe he's actually going to represent himself. So I feel terrible for Lauren's family. I've communicated with her mom, with her brother. I knew Lauren a little bit. We used to communicate. She liked a lot of the coverage of things that I did. And so I don't fully understand. I want to wait to see on that. I would like to provide some coverage of it, but we're going to wait and see how that plays out. So it's possible. It's possible over. I was planning on Friday if the ARCA experts were going to be in, but we'll see. We'll play it out. Folks, I want to remind you, Quality Asphalt Seal Coating. Call them today, 401-283-9815. 401-283-9815 for Quality Asphalt Seal Coating. Call Corey. Now, what can they do? Now, a nice day like today, maybe people want to be outside. They can resurface your basketball court. They can resurface your tennis court. They could resurface your pickleball court. Quality Asphalt Seal Coating. Call them. Call Corey for a free quote, 401-283-9815. 401-283-9815. They also epoxy garages and patios, decorative concrete flooring, and they'll fix your potholes. It's Quality Asphalt Seal Coating, 401-283-9815. Well, folks, right now, 150 on this Wednesday, and they're going to be going back into court with this, with the, it's day 2 of the Karen Reed trial. Okay, I also want to just mention, I will be sharing this. I see now that the South Kingstown Police, I was aware of this missing individual out of Mansfield, but then last seen in South Kingstown. I will, um, I will be posting that on all of our platforms. Okay, Peg O'Keefe is on the stand, so that's going to be starting. I am very anxious. What a witness. She did not testify. Peg O'Keefe did not testify in the first trial. And so Peg O'Keefe taking the stand, I mean, this is, she is such a dynamic individual.
I don't know. It's in the summer of I don't know what year.
And there she is.
Yeah, I really don't know the year. What is that one? He probably took a new
Margaret O'Keefe.
Fear.
She was wonderful with the kids, she said. Ah. Now think about that, folks. So her daughter passed away. Peg O'Keefe on the stand. Her daughter passed away. Her son-in-law passed away. Officer John O'Keefe says, as he said to his brother, I got this. And he stepped in to raise those 2 children. And Karen Reed is on trial for hitting him and then leaving him to die in the snow. And there is Peg O'Keefe. Very emotional for her. This is tough, folks. She having a tough time, as you can imagine, on the stand. Margaret O'Keefe. Now, I'm going to be curious to see if the defense is going to question her. I would think they want to get her off the stand as quickly as possible.
Yes, from Carrie Robbins.
Yeah.
6:15 between
Peg O'Keefe on the stand. Folks, the impression this makes on the court. And when she's going to touch on the tail light with Karen. Oh, wow. Brutal. So this is Peg O'Keefe's stand. Oh, my goodness. Now, last time around, she did not testify. Wow. This is amazing.
Yeah, because she'd take...
All right. So again, folks, we are in Camden. We're going to send it back to JR in just 1 minute in the studio. We're going to check on Road Patrol Live later. But, wow, Peggy O'Keefe on the stand. She was right there.
John was found in a snowbank.
Oh, the whole thing was going on.
I didn't understand, which I said, what do you mean found in a snowbank? She said, found him in the snow.
Terrible.
They don't know what happened. She says he's brought up
to the end of this, I think they will. JR, we're going to break in 15 seconds. At the end of this.
So she says, I'm going to come get you.
Oh, so emotional.
We can drive there. We both have 4.
All right, let's send this back to JR in the studio. Let's send it back to JR in the studio.
Yeah, it took a while to get there.
All right, so it's a little much more later.